I suppose it really depends on your opinion of Horizon Zero Dawn as to whether you actually wanted to see some changes in Horizon Forbidden West or not. I'm a huge fan of Zero Dawn, so sitting down to play Forbidden West for the first time, it was an absolute delight walking into the game and finding
it's all the same, nothing has changed.
Whereas if you hated Zero Dawn but wanted to give Aloy another chance, you might feel a tad disappointed.
Nothing has changed.
Yes, it has.
And Aloy's right, things have changed, and definitely for the better too. The thrill of the hunt was a major component of the satisfaction that I found in Zero Dawn, and a lot of this joy was based on Aloy's focus, which for those who don't know is this little gadget that she sticks in her ear, which she salvaged from an old world ruin at the beginning of Zero Dawn. So those Bluetooth wankers have still managed to find their way into the apocalypse, sadly.
Hi there, I don't know if you can see what I got sticking out of my ear. Bluetooth, yeah?
Aloy's focus has been mechanically and visually enhanced in Forbidden West though, with a much needed quick use function being added, so now instead of stopping Aloy dead in her tracks to scan the environment, she can quickly scan the environment on the go, and we can even tag certain enemy parts. It doesn't cloud the screen either, so my HUD isn't constantly filled with this hazy purple mess of lines which always made it so difficult to make out points of interest. Now when using the focus, the HUD is crisp and clean, so everything of importance is nice and visible, especially those vitally important and not exactly subtle weak spots on the machines, and you just know for a fact these machines are communicating with one another and discussing their Achilles heels.
So you can only be injured on your Achilles tendon.
That's right. My mother dipped me into the river Styx and she held me by my heels, so that's the only part that can be injured. How about you, Testicles?
It's the same. It's similar.
The climbing in Forbidden West was probably the area I most wanted to see the biggest changes. Although it's definitely not up to the standards of Assassin's Creed parkouring mechanics, there's much more freedom in the climbing experience compared to Zero Dawn, though it still has its limitations. A small block of clay can still prove too much for Aloy to climb unless it's being golden showered by those invasively yellow markers suggesting this particular lump of rock can be climbed. In Zero Dawn, we were restricted to those yellow pegs that were pretty sparse around the map, and there's still plenty of those yellow pegs, but Aloy's much improved focus can now highlight the areas that are scalable, like hey, looky here, let me cover this intimidating cliff face with the most unnecessarily convoluted climbing system of topography. It does feel a little daft knowing that Aloy can climb Rock A but not Rock B, because Rock A has a destination at the top of it that developers Guerrilla Games want me to reach, whereas Rock B just doesn't. I've still got to emphasise that the climbing on the whole in Forbidden West feels vastly more fluid compared to Zero Dawn, and it's a good step up, with Forbidden West really showing Zero Dawn how it's supposed to be done. These machines that have ravished the earth and knocked mankind well down the pecking order are the stars of the show once again. With their outrageously self-righteous and egotistical names, we've still got the classics like the Snapmaw, the Stormbird, the Sawtooth, to name a few, but welcoming to the apocalyptic party, there's the new Claw Strider, the Tremor Tusk, the Slitherfang, and the Thunder Bastard. That last one was actually my own personal suggestion anyway, which is probably why I'm sat here making a crappy little YouTube video instead of working for Guerrilla Games' marketing department. Fighting these beastly behemoths is pure exhilaration, whether you calculate your plan of attack by going in stealthily or going in like a metallic bull in an ancient china shop. I love the tactical nature of learning your enemy's patterns of attack and studying their internal designs before homing in on that particular weak spot and bombarding it with everything that Aloy can fire or launch its way. There's a wider variety of ranged attack styles and elemental damage to dish out, and deciding to coat your enemies in the familiar fire or frost damage, or even the new plasma, acid, or purge water elements can make the world of difference depending on the enemy. To make use of these elements, we're given a huge amount of weapon variety to choose from, and there's such a palpable difference in the feeling of each one, as well as presenting alternative methods to take down your prey. So for example, instead of heavily relying on your rope caster to pluck those pesky metal birds out of the sky, there's the new vertical traps that'll just as quickly bring them down to your level. It's this level of combative variety that keeps you coming back for more and for more. Aloy's 6 new skill trees each have special moves within them called Valor Surges, which enhance the combat further, and the haptic feedback on the DualSense provides that punchy feedback feeling throughout. But one area where I still felt there was a square peg being stuffed into a round hole is the melee combat, which certainly feels far better than Zero Dawn, with some new movesets supported by some pretty cool animations, and there's the new Resonator Blast where Aloy plunges her spear deep into her enemies, and this will charge over time. The new Unlockable combo moves certainly improve the feel of swinging Aloy's brutal spear, but melee steel feels like a last resort again. It was never the focus of the combat in Zero Dawn either, and it isn't again in Forbidden West. Even though there's a clear improvement, it doesn't quite feel refined enough, and this was one area I was hoping to see an even bigger improvement. When it comes to stealth, it's pretty much the same as Zero Dawn, with the biggest improvements being made through the dedicated skill tree, like a camo skill that's based on the Stalker machine, but your basics of silent strikes, tagging enemies in their tracks, as well as hiding in those ginger bushes are still the essentials, and thank God those bushes aren't blonde or brunette. There's some other cool new tools for Aloy to use as well, one of which is called the Pullcaster, used for grappling my way to those hard to reach places, or just being a lazy bugger that can't be asked walking across the room to pick up the loot that's all the way on the other side. Not only that, the Pullcaster is used in an environmental puzzle sense that a lot more like Tomb Raider-esque puzzles than they are Zelda-esque puzzles, and it was as satisfying to discover that my brain still works after 3 decades of gaming. That was nice. It also allows Aloy to pull down weakened walls to uncover hidden paths, with the exploration on the whole being fantastic. Looting still an essential part of the gameplay, and keeping your inventory packed with resources is key to surviving. I felt like Zero Dawn had a lot of alluring parts of the map that led to nothing, whereas exploring every nook and cranny in Forbidden West feels far more rewarding, whether it's a valuable container or some rustic car boot to pry open with my spear. Guerrilla Games have nailed their world design from what was an already impressive world design in Zero Dawn, both in terms of its overall design and the striking visuals. I love a world that has such a vast array of biomes and seasons to venture through, whether it's through the dense woodlands, the harsh desert lands, or some bitter snowy mountaintop. Each biome's hiding concealed caves, a secret passageway, or even the old world cauldrons that once created these incredibly problematic robots. These monstrous factories are so big that they're almost biomes themselves, albeit they offer a very linear path. Each one felt different from the last one, presenting enough platforming and exciting enemy encounters to encourage me to delve deeper inside. The amount of wildlife and habitation, the differences in flora, the secret locations, the incredible tall necks to climb up, opening new locations on the map to discover are all breathtaking aspects to this universe. And let's not forget about some of my favourite collectibles that are totally worth finding, not only because they're interesting and built perfectly into the lore of this world, but I just love watching Aloy's innocence and even some of the other characters' innocence during this time period as they discover something so new and mysterious to them, but we as players are so familiar with. Add some really good NPC animations and their conversations on top of the random encounters that I stumbled across, and it all breathes so much genuine life into this world. And I've not even mentioned the fact that there's sprawling bodies of water hiding treasures and new aquatic machines within.
The detail in this place is exceptional.
If there's a better way to explore an impressive open world than using some form of paraglider, then I'm all ears and open to suggestions, because even though it's becoming more and more common in open world games nowadays, I'm actually really happy about that. Well, it turns out there is a better way to mooch around. How about overriding and hopping on a flying machine called a Sunwing to traverse Forbidden West's sprawling map and its jaw-dropping verticality? This isn't actually available until very late in the game though, so until then, I was happily stuck with my little glider. I love climbing a mountaintop and peering off into the distance, attempting to calculate the trajectory and whether I'll actually be able to make that ledge over there. I love it, and thankfully, Aloy's swanky new shield wing glider adds so much more to the platforming elements of the game. The overarching story is probably one of the most fascinating I've encountered in recent times. I mean, come on, robot dinosaurs have caused the apocalypse. Get your bloody popcorn out, people. Playing Zero Dawn is vital for understanding the story though, so I definitely recommend playing on Zero Dawn first. Sticking with Zero Dawn, I always felt that the side quests and the dialogue were generically dull and uninspired, with Lance Reddick, the voice of Silence, and Ashley Birch being the only noticeable standout performers, whereas in Forbidden West the overarching story continues to fascinate, but they sprinkled in some first-class vocal performances and much improved writing. This level of quality spreads into the huge amount of detailed side quests, whether you're playing detective, looking into the story of the wrongly accused, or investigating the machine's presence in an unwelcomed area. It even shines through when stumbling across the smaller activities like the hunting grounds or the new board game called Strike, which I can see people sinking plenty of hours into this fairly complex and intriguing minigame. The audio is mostly really good, with some crunching sounds during combat and the peaceful ambience when exploring, all supported by an awe-inspiring soundtrack, but it's slightly spoiled by this constant echoing effect that indicates whether you're inside or outside, or even if there's something off in the distance, with anyone more than 20 yards away sounding like they're stuck in a cathedral hall. I really like the new cinematic camera angles during face-to-face dialogue moments, giving characters more believability and freedom to move and express themselves. There's still dialogue choices to make as well, and again, they only really offer an instant outcome in that moment rather than any long-term ramifications for the overall story. So yes, we are still allowed to impose our own portrayal of what we believe to be Aloy's rather rude personality when she's chatting to, let's say, the Sun King, and finding out that he had a statue of Aloy erected in her honor after her actions in Zero Dawn.
The only thing that's good is the hair, and that's about it.
You do have great hair, I gotta tell you.
I know, but look at my bum. Look at my arse.
The visuals are nice and crisp throughout, and it's a huge testament to what can be achieved when the highest level of optimization is applied. Yeah, I can't wait to see this on PC one day and see it maximize its potential, but it's incredible with what has been achieved on PS5 and even what I've seen elsewhere on PS4. I can't actually speak to the PS4 version, but the PS5 version blows me away. Even though there's the occasional texture and asset pop in as well, and this happened a little too often during cutscene transitions where it was much more noticeable, but it never felt that excessive. As usual with next-gen console titles, we're given two options of favouring performance or resolution, with resolution being a native 4K at 30 FPS and the performance hitting a fairly stable but not always 60 FPS at 1800p. I rarely find this a difficult choice, always opting for performance, but the 4K option was pretty tempting as it just looks so good. I found myself in the pause menu far too often to see the differences. Eventually I did settle for performance, but I definitely recommend checking out the resolution mode, which might well be for you. The changes that I've already mentioned are clear as day, but there's a lot of subtle ones too, like being able to change the time of day, having a stash for Aloy to send items to if her inventory's full, a new more in-depth crafting table that adds various options than simply crafting on the fly, which make a huge difference. Then there's the new accessibility options, which even though it's common practice in games nowadays, at the time of release it blew me away. I'd never seen anything like it at the time, certainly not in a console game before anyway, with the finest of fine tuning being made available to tweak certain aspects of your HUD and even changing specific elements of the gameplay as well. It's amazing to have these options to really hone your experience to your personal preferences and needs. Let me know if you've played Horizon Forbidden West yet, and if so, what do you think of it? If you've not played it yet though, I definitely recommend it. For me, Zero Dawn still stands a few inches taller than Forbidden West overall, but it's a more than worthy sequel nonetheless. I'd love to hear your thoughts though, and I'll see you in the next one.